Hello, everyone. This is BigReed, and this is another episode of Gaming's Lost Memories, episode 25, Pokemon Red and Blue review and retrospective. I already covered a podcast with the kind of stories surrounding my experience with the original Pokemon games, and so there might be a little bit of information that's identical because some of those experiences with those games were just absolutely awesome, and it's really hard to convey how big that entire time felt. Like literally, you could not escape Pokemon, and maybe it still feels that way. But I will say, with the internet and the spread of information, that was so much significantly more different than 1998. You didn't have the information, so it was like literally, you would go to the playground and 20 people at any given time had Game Boys and were battling and using link cables and stuff, or you go to a comic shop and everybody's playing the Pokemon card game. It's on TV, at the time, which was really funny. Like, regular adult sitcoms, basically everybody was talking about Pokemon because it was just a cultural phenomenon. It's on the news. There's a really funny tidbit of somebody being interviewed on the news, and they're like, "Oh, this isn't gonna last past this Christmas," and now it's literally the single biggest thing on the planet, outside, I guess, of like all of Disney. It's like the biggest franchise ever. But recently, what I wanted to kind of focus on was a little bit more of like the gameplay and my experience with replaying it. 25 years later, 25 years plus, I think at this point, so 98. But yeah, 25 years later, like how it feels just playing it again. My friend also was doing a playthrough of it too, which is really fun because he didn't really play the games at the time, when it was absolutely huge. And like, I cannot describe how many batteries that I've probably killed in my, Game Boy Light, my green Game Boy Light, playing Pokemon, just taking them out of remote controls, is trying to find batteries anyway. Opening the junk drawer and there's just loose batteries floating around, and you're like, "Oh God, I hope these work." It's nice having something rechargeable to play them on. So it's funny just seeing how like the technology has changed in that regard. Of like, your screen didn't have a light, so you're playing by a lamp or playing outside, not in direct sunlight, or just trying to find a way to experience it. Like, people seem like don't really remember that, having a light wasn't really a focus for Nintendo at the time in the 90s. But I will say, just to kind of open it up, replaying the games. So I replayed Pokemon Red on the 3DS Virtual Console. I have Red, Blue, and Yellow on the Virtual Console, and just Crystal. I didn't like Gen 2 as much, but I probably should have bought Gold and Silver as well. Because what I like to do is, like, my copy of Blue on the Virtual Console, I did the Mew glitch, so I have like Mew in that save. And then Red, I fired it up, and it was like, oh, I didn't really have, I was just like halfway through a playthrough. So I normally would always buy both copies of the games outside of Red and Blue because, I used all my birthday money to buy one of them. But I always like getting both versions of the game, and then one is my main playthrough, and then the other one is like my goofy, I'll erase it just to like replay through the game again. I will say now, with the more modern games, with trading and online interactivity, like so much more advanced than it was back in the day, buying both versions, I don't want to say it's kind of like a gimmick. I think it's more of like a tradition. Like, you just kind of like keep it going. But I honestly don't think, and I think they've tested that with Legends Arceus in the new Legends game. I know they're like spin-offs and they're a little bit different, but I don't think you need two versions of the game, and I don't know if it'll impact sales. Like, maybe Nintendo has some identifying information where they're like, no, we actually sell 10% more of 30 million copies if we have two versions of it. So I don't know. I still buy both versions, so maybe I'm part of the issue. But replaying Pokemon Red and Blue, it was, first of all, it was an absolute blast. The games still hold up, and it's so awesome seeing like this old of a video game And keep in mind too, I think this is kind of important to note that Nintendo during this time had, I want to say 1998, so the Nintendo 64 was out. So you had 3D graphical technology, so a pretty substantial increase in power over the Game Boy. And due to, there was still kind of a need for portable gaming. And I do think Nintendo was completely right, with uh, that kind of like decision making is like, hey, this is still really popular, and it all kind of migrated together now. The technology, it's small enough to be portable. Everybody has a cell phone in their pocket, so this was kind of like what the beginning stages that set that up of everyone having a smartphone in their pocket. It's like, hey, what if you had apps on the go? And it's like, oh, games on the go, interesting. But the games, oh my gosh, but playing through Pokemon Red again, I was very curious because I haven't played a full playthrough from picking your starter to beating the Elite Four to becoming the Pokemon League champion. Of like, let's just try to play this over the course of like a couple of weeks in my spare time. Hanging out with the wife, watching murder documentaries, and leveling up a Charizard. But it actually worked out really well. So my playtime was roughly, I want to say, 21 hours. Now, I did not really focus. I caught Pokemon as I encountered them. I didn't really search for Pokemon, though, too much. But everybody that I encountered, I did find. The secondary thing that I didn't do was level up all of the Pokemon that I had. So, like for Rattata, or let me use a different example. I don't think I had a Pidgeot for the first time ever on this playthrough, just because I had a Pidgeotto and I didn't level them all the way up. But this time I tried using a few Pokemon that I've never actually like completed the game with. And who knows, as a young 12-year-old, the games are a lot more figured out now, and more so than it is now. Like there's I want to say there's a lot more balance in the games now because there's, first of all, like 700 additional Pokemon, but you can do a lot of different like IV and EV training. Like there's a lot more balance. There's a lot more moves. They beefed up a lot of types, but with this first game, there's 50 TMs. So you have a TM, which is like a little disc that can teach a Pokemon a move. I believe there's 50 of them. It was really funny going back through as to how many there were. Like, I swear to God, every other second, like you're picking up a technical machine. And some of those moves are pretty good. They did rebalance later on. So like your Pokemon, like, it was really funny having a Charizard not have a fire type move other than Ember until like level 45. And what's even funnier about that is I actually went to Cinnabar Island and beat Blaine, the gym leader who gives you Fire Blast. I actually used that before I even got Flamethrower. So poor Charizard, he can't learn Fly. He's a freaking, okay, first of all, let's talk about the starters. So you start the game and they give you 3 of the best starters. I love this pool of starters. There are other starters that I definitely liked, but one thing I will say that's different from this gen to the later gens is, generally speaking, every generation after this one, maybe after Gen 2, there was a favorite amongst the gaming community. Like Gen 3, for example, it's like Mudkip. Don't get me wrong, Blaziken's awesome. Firefighting, that introduction was absolutely sweet. That's a good typing. Little bit overdone at this point now, but it was like, having a firefighting type was really cool. And I generally always pick the fire types, which is funny. But, Mudkip, everyone kind of looks back and they're like, Mudkip was the favorite. But that wasn't like this with this one's. I think Charmander is probably the overall most popular. But there are staunch defenders of, all 3 of them. Bulbasaur, I just do not like grass types. And one thing I will say with Pokemon Red, everything has a secondary type of like flying and poison. I didn't look it up, but there is an overabundance of poison types and flying types. Like every single bird Pokemon is normal and flying. Which I guess it makes sense. There's bird Pokemon, but like you have your 3 legendary birds, and then you have Dodrio, Fearow, Pidgeotto. I gotta be missing some. Scyther like is another one. You know, Charizard is a flying type. You know what I mean? It's just kind of funny. But I will say that all three starters, so you got Squirtle, Charmander, and Bulbasaur, are all pretty popular. I like Bulbasaur a lot, and we'll talk about him as we talk about, like, you know, kind of starting the game out and everything like that. But I remember looking back, and I don't know if I just picked Charmander first as a fluke, or because he was on the cover of Red. So I bought Blue because they didn't have Red. And honestly, I love Blue, so they're both really good games. I do like having the access to some of the Pokemon that you find in Pokemon Red over Blue. Like I like Scyther a lot as a Pokemon. I like his design. You know, they evolved him and ended up making him better, but I do like his design. But yeah, so starting off, basically you get in Professor Oak. You know, you got your professor. Professor Oak's like, I've been trying to complete this Pokedex, but I'm old. I want you guys to do it. And so he gives you the mission. You have a rival, and they handled this perfectly. I feel like in later games, the rivals became really annoying and just kind of crappy. Like they're not good, but from the get go. Your rival is annoying in this, but it's annoying because he's mean. He's like, all right, you suck. I'm going to be the best Pokemon trainer ever. Smell you later. But it is fun because he's always one step ahead of you. So as you progress throughout the game, he'll meet you at certain points and challenge you to a battle. And the games and the game's difficulty, if you don't know how to play them, it is not an easy experience. And I actually like that because later on, so one of the upsells for me of Pokemon Red and Blue is it does what Pokemon does really, really well, and it just focuses on those few things. So you have your set of Pokemon. So catching Pokemon and battling, it does really well, and it actually feels like a challenge. You know what I mean? So you're going out, you're exploring this world. You have to get 8 gym badges, then you can go challenge the Elite Four. It's very concise. You have a clear objective: get the 8 badges, catch Pokemon, build a team, challenge the Elite Four, who are like the super final boss of the game, become the Pokemon League champion. The secondary is complete your Pokedex. So Professor Oak's like, hey, catch all 150, 151, wink, wink, Pokemon, you know, in this game. And that's it. It's like very clear, very concise. You know exactly what you're supposed to be doing. There's no fluff. Now, I don't mind fluff. I don't mind, you know, building upon this idea, but I have noticed that the quality of life enhancements with Pokemon I have enjoyed, but I feel like they need to get back to the basics of make the gyms challenging again, make them fun. Sure, you can make them, you know, you could add different ways in which you go through the gym, you know, make it a puzzle, just like, oh, there's some puzzles in this one. That's completely fine. But I think they almost need to not utilize AI, but utilize some type of code where if you walk in with a level 41 Pokemon, and that's your highest level Pokemon should be the lowest level for the gym. I think that would be nice. Or just, you know, if there's like a hard mode you can pick where it's like they pick the average level of your Pokemon, or they pick like your highest level Pokemon and then increase their levels by like 15%. So like, you know, you're fighting somebody, if you have a level 41 Pokemon as your highest, then the gyms all have like level 44 Pokemon. I think they need to get back to that, because in Scarlet and Violet, which I haven't even finished, running around and like catching Pokemon seems pretty fun, but like actually engaging in battles is just not fun. Going to the gyms, like you do the gyms out of order, but they don't increase the levels. So it's like you can skip the, you know, faded grass gym and then come back to it with like a level 50 Pokemon and just smoke level 10s. So, but I really liked what this game did. And picking Charmander is basically hard mode. So in my opinion, I feel like Charizard is the overall strongest and best, you know, starter Pokemon. Blastoise is more defensive, and I really do like Venusaur. I like his typing, and I feel like he can have some pretty good moves and everything like that. But you know, starting off, the first 2 gyms are a rock gym, rock and ground, basically. So you're fighting Geodudes, and the only attack you have is, Scratch and Ember. And Ember's not effective against those types, and Scratch, because they have super high defense, like and your two Pokemon you can catch leading up to that point are a Pidgey and a Rattata. So it's like, there are some tips with it. A lot of the status elements are super effective in this. Where Confuse Ray, if the opposing Pokemon's confused, is awesome. Paralyzing is huge. Like if you're actually like in a competitive battle, you want to be paralyzing or confusing. Like you want to be throwing status elements on there. Sleep is pretty good too. Poison outside of toxic is not very effective. It's annoying, but it does like so little damage each turn that if you're not using toxic, which is a TM move that you get later on, which if it does 5 damage, it doubles after that, so it'll do 5. Next turn it does 10. Next turn it does 20. So that's a lot more effective. Like you can, use toxic and then bring out a stalling Pokemon like a Snorlax or a Chansey or something like that, and just keep healing and keep hitting them and just letting them die through the poison. But it's very like challenging if you pick a Charmander. So you kind of have to know like the tips and tricks of, how to beat it. Cause like you don't want to, you would think you wouldn't want to use Ember, but if you level up your Charmander, decently enough, you can kind of time it out and burn the other Pokemon. And since it's a special move, like it does more damage than the physical moves like Scratch. But it's also pretty fun. Like you get a bird Pokemon real early, and they've kind of kept that tradition up too. But every playthrough, I had a Pidgeot, and this was the first time I didn't. And we'll go through my team composition at the end because it was a lot of fun. But I got him to Pidgeotto, and I'm just like, I'm just not feeling him. So I was like looking at a few things, and I was like, what? Because I like flying types, and you need, the HMs. So you have your TMs, your technical machines, and you have your HMs, which are required to progress the game. So Flash, Cut, Fly, Surf, Strength. You need those at certain points to do actions that actually progress the game. One of the quality of life enhancements that were really nice is like if you teach someone an HM move, you can't delete it, which is hilarious. Luckily, like Surf is the best water move in the game. It's one of my favorite attacks. So if you give someone Surf, like you're fine. But like Cut, for example, is just not great. Strength, I don't think Strength is too bad. I prefer Slash for like your normal type physical move. But Strength, I mean, I guess it's not like terrible. But if you have like Cut, a Dig might be one of them. Dig might be a TM. I can't remember. But Flash, like you never need Flash. You need it to get through one cave. So I normally just like catch a Pokemon as an HM slave to teach him that and just get rid of him. Fly is actually a pretty good move. So like that one's okay. It's 2 turns. That's the only downside. But yeah, you kind of have to like plan your team. So like you don't waste a move for like Cut, which is just a bad move. So like I used it to get through the game, and then I ended up benching. I just don't like grass types. I want to like grass types, and maybe they got better later on. But in Gen 1, like I tried. The only one that's kind of acceptable to me is like Executor, because he's a psychic type as well. So you kind of get like I like that typing. I like grass and psychic, and he's pretty solid. He has like good. I think he has good special. But yeah, Charmander is hard mode. So it was really funny hearing my friend he's like, yep, I can't get past Brock. And it's just really funny because everybody's went through that. And I remember going through that as a kid. I'm like, oh, awesome. I like my Charmander. And then it's just like the game's, it's unforgiving. It's like you have limited access to leveling up. Like you basically have to level grind like in a traditional RPG, which Pokemon, I know people don't want to consider it a Japanese RPG, but it is. It's pretty traditional. It's literally a turn-based role-playing game. It's like as traditional as you can get. But it's really funny. It's like if you pick this Pokemon, it is hard mode for the first 2 gyms, because then the second gym is Misty, who is a water type and also has Starmie, which is like one of the best Pokemon in the entire game. And it's really funny looking back, is that is one of the things to look at, is like there are moves that are better, that are Pokemon that are better, period. Like there's just good, like, I never really used Tauros, but Tauros is awesome. Like normal types really came to play in this one. And a lot of them, they transition to fairy types, which kind of makes sense. Like Jigglypuff and Clefairy, which honestly, it's kind of funny they didn't have a fairy type. when one of their Pokemon's name is Clefairy. It took like 20 years to do. But I think they had, what, 16 types, in the original game. So, I mean, or no, maybe it was 15. Because I think Dark came the next gen. No, it was 14 maybe. Dark, Steel, and Fairy all came later, but they're welcome additions. It actually makes a lot of sense to turn them into like fairy types. It's really funny because like normal types, there's a lot of like normal type attacks too. They didn't know how to categorize, which is just really. They're like, it's a normal move. Um, but yeah, so it's really funny, and the games are brutal. Like I'm gonna let my children play them at some point, and I'm very curious. Like I don't know if they're gonna like them because they've played modern Pokemon, which there's a lot of quality of life. Like their games are just significantly easier and nicer to you. Like leveling Pokemon, for example. So in Pokemon, Red, your active Pokemon that is out gets 100% of the experience given in battle. If you swap Pokemon, it's split between them. So if you swap with another Pokemon, it's 50-50. If you catch 50 Pokemon, I think you can get the experience all, which if you have that item and you're holding it, I think you can either turn it on or off. I actually just leveled normally. I didn't really utilize it. But it gives like an even amount of experience to all of your Pokemon. So they knew there was going to be a way of like you need to level up your Pokemon. But, ultimately, the easiest way to do it that I found on this playthrough was just use whatever typing is best. And, there's going to be periods where you'll have a Pokemon who's just a higher level until, you go somewhere where there's a lot of grass types and now it's time to use Charmeleon again. But yeah, so the games they're not easy, and they were designed for, I don't want to necessarily say children. Like obviously, because in the game, like the main character that you are resonating with at the time is 10 or 12 years old or whatever, and like you're exploring the world. So it's almost like your traditional coming of age tale. Your mom's in your hometown of Palatown, and she's like, "Oh, I'm so sad to see you go," and you're going on this big adventure in the world. The themes are also dark. So like later on, there are more of like, will the world end? Those kind of themes and everything like that. But this one, it was very interesting. Like one of the adversaries, Team Rocket, they're just criminals. So they steal Pokemon. They use Pokemon to do evil, and they're like the mafia pretty much. Like they're just like, how can I make money? How organized crime? We'll do what we want. We'll use Pokemon to further our agenda. So it's very interesting to see that in the world because there's a lot of like mature themes in Pokemon Red where it gets a lot softer and more friendly later on. One of my favorite parts regarding that is Lavender Town. So everyone kind of knows Lavender Town, but the entire plot to Lavender Town as you get there, the music's absolutely creepy. There's, ghosts everywhere, and everyone's talking about Team Rocket was trying to take a Cubone. Its mother tried to protect it, and they basically like cornered it and killed it. So there's not a lot of like your Pokemon don't die, they faint, right? So that was like a big thing of like they battle and everything like that, but at the end of the day, they don't get hurt from it. You can heal them at a Pokemon Center. Every town has a Pokemon Center where they take care of your Pokemon and heal them back up. There's items like potions for healing and everything like that. But that's a pretty heavy theme for a child. And honestly, most of the Team Rocket, they're like, get out of here, scram kid. Like we're committing crimes. And like, that's the whole plot is you're going through, you need some type of item to see what that ghost is. Cause there's a ghost that's basically like blocking you from doing anything of like going through, the Pokemon graveyard. I forget what it's called, Pokemon Tower, but it's where they bury the Pokemon that have passed away. So like that whole area is just like very sad because you imagine if they're like pets, and everybody has a pet that they grew up with or that they've had where you have a very close bond with them, dog, cat, something like that. And it's like, so what happens when you get older because you're Pokemon age too. So it's like, in the perfect world, like now it's all like, hey, Pikachu, yay, everybody's fun. It's all, but it's like, no, there's people that go through their lives, they have kids and their Pokemon get older and their Pokemon pass away. So they have like an entire town basically dedicated to this where, a traumatic experience happened where their Team Rocket was stealing a Pokemon from their mother and they cornered it and killed it, and that's like a plot point. The music's still sad. I don't care what anyone will say. It's like creepy, sad. They program one of the NPCs in there, and it's like, hey, do you believe in ghosts? And if you say yes, she says, oh, there are believers. And if you say no, then she's like, oh, I guess that white hand on your shoulder is nothing then. And it's like, ooh. I remember reading that as a kid. I'm like, what the heck? Why'd she say that? I'm 12, man. What's going on here? But yeah, seeing the challenge of the games was really refreshing this time through. One of the funniest things, which I never used Nidoking or Nidoqueen, is Nidoking is like one of my favorite Pokemon now. Every time I play the game, he is on there. I don't understand why certain Pokemon and certain types can learn every single move. And largely that's what a lot of this is like your typing's important, your stats are incredibly important because you'll just have, certain Pokemon that are like I finished with a Jolteon on my team, for example, and I think it's the fastest Pokemon in the game. It's one of them, but like the speed stat is just absolutely insane. So like you're using speed and special attacks, right? And it's kind of funny. Like certain Pokemon just have like better stats. Nidoking is very balanced, but the move pool is just stupid. Like he can learn Surf. He's a poison and ground type, he has access to Earthquake, which is awesome. But it's so funny. Like now, every playthrough I do, I always catch a Nidoking or a Nidoran male, and you can basically go through and he levels up at level 16, and then you can give him a Moonstone. So you can have literally a Nidoking at level 16, like by the second gym, which is just awesome. So he has like solid stats and can learn all these moves. The caves and everything too. So there's a lot of like puzzle based elements, and you travel around, and they're designed to be hard because like the game even acknowledges like Victory Road, the last like cave system you go through before the Elite Four. They're like, hey, is this too tough for you? Because there's high level Pokemon everywhere. You got to solve puzzles. You got to use HMs, and then all the trainer battles are like they gave them legit Pokemon and like high level Pokemon. The AI, or I shouldn't say AI, it's not AI. But the programming of the trainers, like they'll use attacks that aren't that great, like Leer, you know what I mean? Which like changing your stats and everything isn't necessarily bad. But then some of them will be like, oh, I'll use Hypnosis. Then you're like literally asleep and getting double slapped like left and right. So it's like, oh, cool. How long will my Pokemon be asleep and unable to act? 5 turns. 5 turns. Okay, awesome. But yeah, you actually need like the use of items. I found like I don't understand why I always hoard items in RPGs. I'm like, I better save this for a rainy day, and I'm like, well, now I'm like, yeah, you just got to use it. I feel like the game's designed to use antidotes and potions throughout all of this. But yeah, the cave systems are pretty long. So like you go in, you have all of your Pokemon are fresh, but then you're battling random Pokemon if you choose to, catching them, and then there's just trainers everywhere. Because the whole concept of the game is to create your team. You're battling constantly. Like anywhere you're traveling in Pokemon, there are trainers that are like ready to battle, which is actually really refreshing and kind of nice because like I'll seek them out before I kind of progress. Like you can skirt around some of them, but the way the game's designed, it's like you're running into Pokemon or Pokemon trainers to battle. But yeah, the difficulty was actually kind of nice. There were times when like I'm going through a cave and I'm like I'm gonna use an escape rope because like I don't think I have enough to get through the remaining Team Rocket battles in this game. Like I don't think it's gonna happen. So I'm gonna have to go out, heal, buy some items, and then go back through with a beefier team. I also liked, and this is something that I want to focus on because it's reminding me of Mount Moon, where so after you beat the first gym leader, you have to go through Mount Moon, which leads you to Cerulean City for your second gym. But what was really interesting about that, I guess I just never noticed this until I saw something like really recently, like in the past month or so. So Paris, the little, I guess a crab. Would you call him a crab? He's a bug Pokemon, but he looks like a little crab guy, and he has 2 mushrooms on his back, and then he evolves into Parasect. And he has white eyes, and it's like it explains in the Pokédex entry. It's like basically like the mushroom on his back has taken over the host, and I guess I never put 2 and 2 together, but there's an episode of the anime where Paris does not want to evolve into Parasect, and they're like, yeah, because he dies. And I'm like, oh, yeah, when he evolves, because like the mushrooms on the back are like draining the nutrients of Paris. So when he evolves, the whole mushroom has just taken over, and the whatever Paris is, like whatever Pokemon he is dead, and now the mushroom's just controlling him. And that's like one of the other things. It's like some of these designs and like Pokedex entries are just kind of like serious. I know that's been like serious like later on too. Like some of them, have been like creepy, but it's just like, oh, I just never put two and two together because like his eyes are fully white. So yeah, he's just dead. And then that's why in the anime he was afraid to evolve. Probably it's like, oh, geez, okay. Too many poison types, like even Nidoking, my guy. What's funny is this playthrough too is Nidorino is not a ground type, so I actually didn't evolve him until I beat Misty because with a Charmander and a Pidgeotto, that boss fight I feel like she's over. If you pick Charmander, she's by far the hardest gym because Starmie is just an awesome Pokemon. And it's another Pokemon. It's like why does a water type? I think it's water and psychic. I might be wrong, but it's like why does he have access to Thunderbolt and like thunder? Like why can Nidoking also use Thunderbolt, Surf, Ice Beam? He probably can learn Ice Beam. Maybe he can't actually, but it's like the move pool is just absolutely ridiculous. And the other thing that I will say that I've noticed like on later playthroughs that I've been taking advantage of is any of the attacks that have low accuracy but knock out Pokemon in one hit. If you use battle items, they are definitely worth it. Like X accuracy, if you use that, and then you can use like 5 crab hammers or 5 fissures, or I think Nidoking has ones like horn drill or something like that. You just get 5 instant KOs back to back, and it's like, oh, like I never thought to like use the items. I never used items. My Pokemon teams had to have been so bad, and I think the only reason I beat the Elite Four was because I over leveled my Pokemon. I either over leveled them or I used the glitch later on. Like my later playthroughs, I would use the missing number glitch to duplicate items, and so I would get a rare candy and just duplicate rare candies, and just everybody would be level 100. And I'm just like scorching on through. But this one I played through, and like I think most of my Pokemon were like mid 40s when I beat the Elite Four. I did beat them on the first try. But it was definitely pretty challenging. So my team ended up being and I had 5, and then I had an Executor because I was going to use him as like a psychic type, but I couldn't level him up, and he was getting destroyed, and he just didn't have good attacks. He had Solar Beam, which was okay, and then he had Confusion, I think, so even before Psychic. But I had Jolteon, awesome. Nidoking, Lapras, awesome as well. Dodrio, Charizard. And then on my team currently, I went through after I beat the Elite Four and grabbed Mewtwo and was like, okay, you're my psychic type now. Which also, it's like really funny that you could have caught a Mew. So I was reading some stuff, and I thought it was mind blowing like a decade ago when my friend told me that you could actually catch Mew in the game. And it was programmed in because it was always like the it's so funny. The creators of the game, I didn't realize, actually put Mew in as kind of like a surprise joke, but they released the rumors about Mew intentionally because everybody was like, "Oh, Mew's under the truck." There's so many glitches in this game, and there's so many things that you can do out of a certain order. And like, I'll give you a great example. Like, if I remember when you are at the third gym, there's the SS Ann, which is like a giant cruise liner, and that's where you get the HM cut so that you need to progress the game. So you have to go through there. So if you go through that, battle everyone, get the HM, and if you get the HM and leave, it triggers a scene where the SSN goes away. So it's like, okay, we're setting out, because you basically did what the story progression needed to do. But I think you can either use an escape rope or something. You can get out of there and you go back to the, what do you call it? I'm trying to think. I forget how I triggered this. But basically, you leave it, get back to the Pokemon Center, and I think even if you have cut, as long as you did it that way, you can go back into where the SSN is because it doesn't trigger the thing where you can no longer go through again, I believe. There's a way where you can basically get back into that area, and you can surf over because there's like a little walkway you can surf over, and there's like a truck. And for the longest time, it was like Muse under that truck. You have to use strength. So it's like you have to do like half the game out of order. Which one of the other fun things that I really really loved about this is there's like 4 or 5 cities that literally all connect together, but you just have to progress because there's a Snorlax block in the way. You need a few items. So, but you can do things like out of order. I Saffron City, when I went to go beat Sabrina, the psychic gym leader, I accidentally did like the next 2 gyms first. So like when I went back, I was like 10 levels above her. I was like, oh, whoops, my bad. I forgot that I actually needed to go into like Silphco and save them. I don't know. I just forgot to trigger that whole event. But it is really cool. Like once that all opens up, like how interconnected the map is, because the game feels pretty big for an 8 megabyte cartridge game. The game feels like absolutely huge. And so I really like that it's not open world. Like you do have to do certain things in certain orders, but there's a lot of like I don't want to say glitches, but if you do certain things like out of order, it's okay. Like you can beat a certain gyms out of order essentially. It's like, and it depends on when you get like HMs and everything like that. You can just, if you're just grinding and you walk, you'll be basically able to traverse the areas without having to stick to the script and do a certain order, which is really enjoyable. Having the escape ropes and like fly and stuff too was really nice because it allows you to go back to certain areas very quickly. Like the game opens up, like as long as you explored an area, went into a Pokemon Center and like healed there, it opens it up for fast travel. Essentially, is what that is, which that's really nice. And it's like so funny too because there's certain parts you can just miss too because they're not required. Like a great example is I caught Articuno, I caught Moltres, I caught Mewtwo. I realized I never went to the power plant because you need Surf to get to it, but I apparently just like never went there. So I never got Zapdos on my playthrough just yet, but I'm like about to go back through and do it. But I I really like that about the games. Like so now at the end you can kind of fast travel and there's not really a post game. The post game is pretty much the Pokédex, and that's still true in the modern day games. But there wasn't like like a battle tower or anything like that. I don't remember if the Elite Four gets a boost. I don't think they do. I think that happened in later games, but one of the most fun things was the final battle because it was challenging. So I'll kind of jump a little bit. The exploration, obviously was fun. Leveling your Pokemon, building your team, sticking to like Pokemon that are like pretty good. Like Dodrio, and it might be my favorite flying type now. And I love Pidgeot. Don't get me wrong; it has some cool attacks and everything like that. But I just it's fast. It hits hard. I don't know. I've enjoyed it. It can fly, which like some of the move casting. Like I give you an example. Charizard cannot learn fly. He can in Pokemon Yellow, which he is a dragon looking thing with wings. Dodrio, who does not have wings or arms, can fly, which is just like so hilarious to me. Like what I don't know, you're spinning like a helicopter or something. I can't even fathom how you're flying around on this, but I think they were like, oh, it's a bird type, and then forgot to like, they're like, oh, it doesn't have arms. It's basically like an ostrich without arms. Like you kind of forgot. But no, it was really fun to like utilize that Pokemon, which I've never used before. Nidoking I have used before. I've never beat the game with Nidoking, I don't think. But Dodrio, Jolteon, I was trying to do Tentacruel, which I like, but once again, it was another poison type. And I just started like leveling it. I'm like, I'm not feeling it. And then I remembered, I'm like, oh, you get a Lapras, which is water and ice. And I was like, for another reason, I think because I got it at such a low level that I just never used it. Like I would always try to trade for like the starters. So like if I, funny thing you can do. So we'll talk about this because I do think it is like really funny, like looking back. So if you start a new save on Pokemon Red and Blue, you can, the first quest, so to speak, is you go through, you travel to the town, you go to the Pokemart, you get the parcel. So like Professor Oak has a package. You come back, you give him the package, and that kind of like opens up the game from there. It's like, okay, now you're going to get the Pokédex. Now you're going to like, actually get to play the game. But if you do that part and don't save. So like, say you have your save, you have a completed Pokédex and everything like that. You can start a new game. Just don't save it. Do not save it. Do not save it. I will tell a quick story here in a second. But you can get Pokeballs, and then you can get to a trading point, go to the Pokemon Center in the beginning, and you can trade your starters. So we've done that before to get the starters. So like, you'll keep your main save. Your friend will do that, get the starter, get the Pokeballs, trade that to you. But the key here is then after they get the Pokemon, then you turn your game off. It didn't save over your save, so you're still good. You can still play your regular save, and like that was just like a really cool little trick to basically get all three starters on a save. And I'll never forget. Oh my gosh, I had cousins, and I feel like they were into Pokemon because it was really popular, but I don't know how much they like it. I still like it today. Like I don't know if they would still like it now, but I remember we were doing that, and maybe I should have explained it better. But I just remember like saying, I heard a beep, and I was like, just don't save your game. And he's like, what? And I'm pretty sure he had a completed Pokédex, and it's just like, well, that's gone forever. And I remember feeling so bad because I'm like, oh man, like I don't even know what to say to that because like once you save over it, it's like now you're stuck with this new. Now, back in the day, I would just constantly replay this game and start fresh, and it was fun. I will say the core experience, the red and blue, I can go back to and just reset my game and play again. And I don't think that's necessarily true for many of the other ones. I will say a lot of like the 2D ones and the sprite ones up through Gen 5, the replayability I feel like is pretty high. Like the core experience is pretty enjoyable. I feel like with the 3D ones is when you kind of slowly started transitioning into a lot of like the quality of life where there's a lot of post game online trading and everything like that. So you have access to the other Pokemon and everything like that. But the battling almost seems in the way now. Like Scarlet and Violet, it felt like they don't really want you battling. They want you. I don't know what they want you doing, but like in this one, it's like it's about the battles. It's about like the main core game, which was definitely preferred. I like that a lot. Like I could restart my game, start fresh, and still have a really fun time catching all the same Pokemon, playing it. Like it's a really fun core experience. I do. The last thing I'll probably focus on here is the Elite Four and how it was actually challenging. So I would say naturally, like if you're progressing through the game, your Pokemon are probably going to be without any grinding, like real grinding, probably between level 40 and 50. Everyone in the Elite Four is like level 56 plus. So essentially, what they did is that they're like, this is going to be a challenge, and you have to fight all four trainers in a row. You can bring healing items, but you cannot heal at a Pokemon Center. You don't get to refresh the power points in your moves. So, like, if you have 15 Thunderbolts or whatever, and you run out, which did happen to me, then you can't use Thunderbolt anymore, so you can't heal. So if you bring items, you're good to go. But if you don't, like, you gotta challenge all four of these people in a row, and they're not easy. And they use really good Pokemon too. So like you start off with water and ice types. Then you have like a fighting type gym, but it's more of like there's a lot of like ground types and everything like that. And like they'll have like a Machamp, they'll have a Gengar, they'll have you're gonna encounter an Alakazam, you're gonna encounter some of the most difficult types. Like there's a Ghost type trainer, and it's like, oh cool, I have to fight a Gengar who's like arguably one of the best Pokemon in that gen with really good moves. So it's like it's not easy. So like I remember replaying it like probably 15 years ago, and I got to the Elite Four and they were kicking my butt. And it was because I was like using my same teams that I had as a kid. It was like an overleveled Charizard, a Pidgeot, and just like a mediocre team pretty much. And it was just really funny. So I was like, holy crap, like these guys are hard. Like I actually like need to go level up because they're kicking my butt. The final battle, so spoiler alert, you beat all four, you finish with a dragon trainer, and I think up until that point you haven't fought any of the dragon types, which I think is only like I honestly I feel like only Dragonite in his line is the dragon type, like the actual typing. Then he has like a Gyarados, obviously. Who else does he have? He has an Aerodactyl, which I don't think either of those are dragon types. They just kind of like look like dragons, I guess. But You fight him, and his team's just absolutely ridiculous. And then he's like, you know what? I I hate to say it, you beat me, but you are a Pokemon master. You would be the Pokemon champion, but and it's like dun dun dun. Your rival, came right before you, beat them all, and the whole setup of this is just absolutely perfect. Like they did a really good job with this game of like showing progression. And I feel like, you have like five rival battles throughout the game up until this point. So like you feel the progression of his team and like the speech that he gives. So like let's just start there. He's like, I've traveled the world building a team that can, go against any Pokemon type. And he's like, do you know what that means? I'm the most powerful trainer in the world. And it just immediately goes into a musical theme for the battle that you have not heard before, and it's absolutely awesome. So it's like you're like getting amped up. His team is good, and his team is even a higher level than the Elite Four. So like all of his Pokemon are in the level 60s. And then he has like a beefed up Blastoise at the end or whatever typing. So like he picks, if you pick a Charizard, he picks the weakness to it, and vice versa through any of the three. So like if you pick a Venusaur, he'll pick the Charmander. But oh my gosh, like I literally got through thanks to Jolteon and Lapras, and I got lucky because Jolteon ran out of Thunderbolts, and I got to the end of his team, and he just has that Blastoise, who has like Hydro Pump and Blizzard, and I'm like, oh my god, I'm like, I don't have any more Thunderbolts, so Jolteon went down, and I have Lapras out there. I think Lapras was using Confuse Ray. I kept Confuse Ray on one of my Pokemon. I think it was Lapras that had it, but I'm like just confusing him and just hitting him with ice beams, and I'm like, it's not even effective, and I'm just blasting with ice beams because that's like all that I got left. And you finish it, you register with like the Hall of Fame, and it's just like that feeling of challenge and accomplishment I have not felt in any of the recent games. Now I will say, like, looking back, I did like Pokemon Sword and Shield. I did not like Scarlet and Violet, and maybe I need to go back to those and play those a little bit more. But more of where I had fun was traveling around and like catching Pokemon and doing the raid battles. I did enjoy the raid battles. You can do those online, and it's like four people battling a giant, beefed up Pokemon. And then you get a chance to catch it at the end. And they're randomized. If you're online, there's events, and you'll get like special Pokemon or starters or like legendary. So it's like I like that, but you'll notice that kind of like goes around or centers around fighting like a really big challenging Pokemon with beefed up stats that doesn't make any sense, or catching Pokemon. Both are very fun, don't get me wrong, but like battling a trainer that just has like a really good balanced team that's a higher level than yours, I miss. And that was one of my favorite things about playing Red and Blue again. So kind of the retrospective, the game holds up. Some of the Pokemon like Tauros, Persian with its high speed stat, Slash, for example, Slash being tied to speed for the critical hit. So if you have like a high enough speed, you have a higher probability of getting a critical hit with that attack every time. Just like goofy stuff like that. Using X accuracy and utilizing that to use super powered moves that have like a low hit rate to just hit every single time and one shot Pokemon. It's I look back and I still think they're my favorite games. And, I really like Gen 3 as well. So that might be a really fun one to kind of fire back up and, do like a proper playthrough of. But they hold up. They hold up today. They're so fun. And I think there's something to, like, if I could give one piece of advice to like the Pokemon team, and now it's huge. This is a multi-billion-dollar franchise. They have to make this thing accessible. But there's several ways to bring what the core of Pokemon Red and Blue do well. So there's a core experience of building a team, battling, and catching Pokemon with a challenge at the end. You have a big challenge. Where now, like, that challenge is there, but even with like the gym battles in the more recent games, they made it more like family friendly. It's like the Pokemon you're battling against, the gym trainers intentionally use like lower level Pokemon and stuff like that. What I would like, and what I think would make a lot of sense, would be like, guys, I want everybody, like the top 5 people in the Pokemon company, I want to give you a copy of Red and Blue, and for this next week, your job is to just go from the beginning of the game all the way to the end of the game. And I want you to make a little column, a little T-chart, and write what the game does well and what it doesn't do well. and look at that. Go through the list of what the game doesn't go well and say, hey, are there things that we could have improved or already have improved upon? I'll give you an example. The experience share. That's an improvement. Hey, it's kind of hard to level Pokemon in this one. Okay, check. We have a solution for that. Then I would look at what the game does well. And do the games that you are making still do what the original concept was very well? And if the answer is no, how do you bring that back? And personally, for me, I think there's two ways. The first way is you just redesign the main experience that everyone experiences as that of we're going to get back to our core competencies, add in the slice of life and add in the quality of life enhancements, and that's our game. We're going back to the basics. Or you do something kind of, like a hard mode. And I know Pokemon Black and White or Black and White 2 had a setting where if you press the button combination, you could put it in easy mode or hard mode or something like that, where it changes the levels of like the gym leaders. Make that a choice. Like, hey, this doesn't impact your experience at all, except if you pick hard mode, all the levels are 20% higher. And you could completely do that without altering anybody's experience or making it worse at all for anybody involved. So either you integrate that back into your core experience, or you make it a side thing that is a choice that kind of like makes it, because the games are almost too accessible and it's not fun battling anymore. And I know, Pokemon is the Pokemon Company and Nintendo. They just recently announced that they're releasing like a battle only type game that'll be on mobile and Switch, which is interesting. And maybe that's kind of like where they're going with that. But it would just be really nice to play through the main games and have a challenge at the end that like just gives replayability. Because finishing Pokemon Red with that challenge was absolutely awesome. And then, what's even more fun is I have a Mewtwo on my team right now because it unlocks the cave outside of Cerulean City where there's just beefed up, like level 60 crazy rare Pokemon and then a Mewtwo at the end. So one thing I will say with the retrospective and the review is it's pretty much impossible to review games that are kind of just cemented classics at this point. But what I will say is, like, from a retrospective, the games are still incredible. You can play them in 2025 and they're still amazing. The legacy, that they kind of have created, kids today and people today it's still the same. It's like I'm having the same conversation from 25 years ago of like, wow, this is really popular and everyone's playing it. And it's the same. The shows are still extremely popular. The card game is still extremely popular. The games are probably more popular than they have ever been. It's just it's wild seeing, but you always kind of have to look at where you came from and what you were good at then. And those games were just building the teams, the Pokemon. There were so many Pokemon in the original 151 too that their designs still stand up. So they really knocked it out of the park there. Like now, there's some Pokemon where, the designs might leave, something to be desired, maybe like an enhancement or a change, but they're phenomenal games. They still hold up. I still had a blast, and I'm probably going to continue playing it, for another week just to kind of like wrap up catching all the Pokemon I can and maybe beating the Elite Four a few more times. But yeah, if you haven't played the originals, highly recommend it. They're still amazing, and I look forward to hopefully Nintendo with the Nintendo Switch 2 re-releasing a lot of these classic Pokemon games on the Virtual Console. But thank you so much for joining me today. This has been BigReed with another episode of Gaming's Lost Memories.